So I wanted to share with you a revelation I had, or an insight I had, about that there are what appears to be different levels of healing methods. And when I say healing, I'm referring mostly to emotional healing, which is the cause of all of our illnesses and everything. So if we're out of whack in our emotions are create everything, right? Energy in motion. So I realized that, this is in response to, and I know you've said it, I've said it a dozen times recently during all of this energy waves and all of the upheaval of emotions. Haven't you said, I thought I healed that already. I was totally fine with that. And all of a sudden it's come up again. Why is that? And it hit me that at different levels of consciousness, it requires different ways of healing those emotions. So let's first remind you or tell you that, yes, we know this, there are different levels of consciousness. We would say that there's the asleep consciousness, and we're not talking about sleeping, but that, say in the mass humanity, those people, the consciousness inside of them is still sleeping, and they're functioning from complete ego perspective, very little conscious awareness to anything of spiritual or ethereal type ways, metaphysical ways. So that level of consciousness is one of ego and the intellect, okay? Everything is cause and effect, a mechanical view of the body, and the intellect drives everything. So we have that level. And then when consciousness awakes up inside of you, self-realization, you have cosmic consciousness, then God consciousness, and unity consciousness. And let me just close out this thing that popped up. And so what I realized is that in a sleep consciousness, which is, we do if you do psychoanalysis or you go to a counselor, then one way of healing emotions, or that way of healing emotions, or even in your everyday life, comes from the intellect. You go, yes, now I understand why this happened and all this sort of stuff. The intellect can deal with it and you can cruise through life, right? You have an understanding. You understand why it happened and why your psyche's reacting this way. And that takes you a long way. It did for me. As a kid, I had some counseling, and then during my life, I had counseling, and I really had a good understanding of why I was reacting the way I was. And it held for quite a long time, right? And then it doesn't hold. Then all of a sudden you start waking up and you enter into the spiritual world, and there's a shift. You begin stirring from your asleep mode. Consciousness is beginning to wake up. And then say you have self-realization, which is cosmic consciousness. And all of a sudden these things start coming up all over again. And you're like, what? I thought I dealt with it. Well, you did at that level of reality. Because each level of consciousness comes with its own set of rules and truths. So it's really true. Truth is relative. Truth is relative to the consciousness perspective you're coming from. Yeah? So at the asleep level, there's one truth. If you go up to the next level, there's a whole new set of truths that may contradict the one below it and the one above it. So everything is relative and paradoxical. So it's just fascinating. Anyway, so you can move up into cosmic consciousness, and all of a sudden people go, oh, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not my emotions, I'm not anything. All I am is pure consciousness, and they're existing in kind of this void state way out of the body. And everything's an illusion. There's no one here. And they will have things, their emotions, those same situations come up again for healing in this new paradigm. And how this level of consciousness deals with it is through detachment. I am not any of those things. Everything's an illusion. Okay, cool. That works for them. And then, but what if they suddenly slip into God consciousness? Sorry, I'm getting clouds and it's getting dark here. I wish I would have turned the light on. So they're in God consciousness. And at God consciousness, which all these levels can merge back and forth. So, you can merge back and forth, and these, when you're in a different level, then the stuff will come up again. So if you move permanently into God consciousness, then all of a sudden you start coming back down from the void, you start entering into the body and the heart, and you're like, oh, everything is love, everything is God, I love everything, etc., etc. You know what I'm talking about. And this is where many of the healing systems come from, even within the group that, or the Gene Keys, which is what I work with. There's the approach where they suggest when emotions come up that you allow, accept, and embrace. And that totally works at that God consciousness level. Allow, accept, and embrace. Love that emotion away. But at all of these three levels, there's still this me, subject, and this thing, my emotions out there that I'm to deal with. At a sleep level of consciousness, then I deal with it through this thing, my emotions, through the intellect. The next level, I deal with the emotions and everything else through detachment. God consciousness, I deal with this thing, I'm going to love it. I'm going to love it to death. I'll love that hair away. Watch that. I'm referring to an old commercial, and it was a terrible joke. But you get it. But in all of those levels, there's that it's still this subject, object, something outside of myself that I've got to deal with. And this is, and I think remains, it never really fully deals with those emotions completely. Does a lot of work, a lot gets taken care of at each higher level, but there's still a fragment remaining until you reach unity consciousness. And in unity consciousness, you realize, oh, there is no other thing. We're all one thing, and it's me everywhere. Everything is me. Everything is my consciousness, quote unquote, my consciousness. And at that level, emotional healing, those other things, tools, won't work. Because you realize then, oh my God, that anger, that's me, that's my consciousness. It's not something I have to deal with. It's not something outside of myself. It is me. And at that level of consciousness, the way to heal it is you have to become it. Because it is you. It is already you. So this is what I've done, and it works brilliantly. This ball of anger or sadness or whatever emotion is, you probably feel it somewhere in your body or in your astral field. You just take the entire concentration of your consciousness into that ball of whatever, anger, and you become it completely. You go, okay, this is me. I am anger. I'm going to walk around now and I'm going to be totally identified as anger. I am the anger. And the moment you do that, that anger begins totally dissipating away, because now you have given it your full awareness by becoming it, because it is not outside of you, it is you. It's part of you, part of your consciousness that you've tucked away over here. And at other levels of conscious awareness, you've dealt with it in different ways. And yes, you've chipped away at parts of it, but never fully integrated it back into yourself as you. You've been looking at it as something other than you. And so why am I telling you all this? You don't need to be in unity consciousness to use that method, because higher levels of truth all work at any level of reality, right? But a sleep reality down here, it's like the Russian doll thing. The inner thing doesn't work for the next level or the next level, but the one around the whole thing works at all levels. Probably a very bad analogy or metaphor, but you get it. So you can continue to allow, accept, and embrace, or detach from it all, or use your intellect to try to deal with these emotions that are coming up. But I have to tell you, if you really want to get rid of it, you're going to have to become it. Become fully identified as that emotion. Know it is you. Know it is your consciousness that it's part of you that you've shifted off over here, that you need to become it in order to completely integrate it and transform it back into its original formation of consciousness, its brilliance. Yeah. I hope all that made sense. I felt like I was talking kind of quickly. Anyway, happy emoting.